Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's talk about Bray Wyatt and let's talk about Impact Wrestling, because as you've probably seen in the thumbnail for this video, there's a lot of stories going around right now when it comes to Impact Wrestling, going after some big former WWE stars, former world champions. One of them is Bray Wyatt, and that is that Impact Wrestling is reportedly looking to sign Bray Wyatt. Now, it has been noted here that AEW also has interest in signing Wyatt, and it was reported over SummerSlam weekend via Wrestling Observer's radio show. Dave Meltzer mentioned there is a feeling among higher-ups in AEW that Wyatt will be signing with All Elite Wrestling once he's able to do so, with some saying it's just a formality. But in an update, Dave Meltzer on the Sunday Night's Main Event podcast noted that Impact Wrestling officials are, quote, really after Wyatt and want him to sign with the company. Now, there's no word yet on if the interest is mutual there, but it is certainly interesting that Impact Wrestling is making a strong play for the former Universal Champion. Now, of course, WWE released Bray Wyatt on Saturday, July 31st. His 90-day non-compete clause reportedly expires on Friday, October 29, which is a week before AEW Full Gear on November 6. It will certainly be interesting to see where Wyatt ends up this fall and what kind of character he decides to bring with him. Now, in an update when it comes to this, we've got some more information about it because reportedly in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, it was once again reported by Dave Meltzer that Impact Wrestling is really after Bray Wyatt. But again, the discussion of whether or not there is mutual interest there or it's just a case of Impact Wrestling being interested in Bray Wyatt remains to be seen. I still think, if I had to hold my hand on my heart and you said, Owen, where do you think Bray Wyatt is going to end up? My response is still kind of the same. I just see Wyatt ending up in AEW, to be honest with you. I can't really envisage a scenario where he would go to Impact, unless it's a kind of a situation. We are going to talk about Buddy Murphy, or Buddy Matthews, as he's now known by. I could maybe see a situation whereby Wyatt would want maybe more flexibility on certain dates, but he would get that in AEW anyway. It would just be a case of, when it comes to Bray Wyatt and an option on other dates, I think if he wanted other dates, he would just want to work New Japan. I can't see a situation where Wyatt's like, I want to work on the independent scene, or I want to do this, I want to do that. Bray Wyatt, again, this isn't a guy that's coming in for a small amount of money. He's a former Universal Champion. In 2019, early 2020, he was one of the hottest acts in pro wrestling with a Fiend character. This is a guy that was working with John Cena at WrestleMania last year. This is a guy, again, is a multiple-time world champion. All of this stuff is legitimate. So, first of all, if Impact Wrestling were able to pull off that signing of a Bray Wyatt, of course it would be a massive deal, an absolutely ginormous deal for Impact Wrestling. It would be a huge coup. But I tend to lean in more to the reports that he is probably going to end up in AEW. I think that, again, to me that just makes more sense. I think it's more likely that he would end up going to AEW. I think just, again, everything's just, it's weird how everything kind of is playing out at this point. Bray Wyatt's non-compete clause it ends right like a week before Full Gear. It's around Halloween time when that happens as well. The Fiend is the most Halloween character you can think of. That all to me makes a lot of sense that he would go into AEW. I think if push comes to shove, I think Wyatt will end up in All Elite Wrestling. I think he'll probably show up at Full Gear. We know the names that are coming into AEW. Of course, CM Punk's just arrived in AEW. Daniel Bryan set to debut at All Out next Sunday. There's been rumors about Ric Flair coming in soon. Bray Wyatt as well. AEW certainly expanding their roster, and maybe Impact Wrestling will try and make an offer to Bray Wyatt. I'm sure that Impact Wrestling have reached out to Bray Wyatt. But I think what's critical in these reports is when it states that, you know, we're not sure whether or not the interest goes both ways. We don't know if it's a situation of is Wyatt truly interested in coming to Impact, or is just a case of Impact Wrestling chasing Bray Wyatt? I tend to think it's probably the latter. And again, we don't know the situation. Of course, look, I mentioned this before, and I mentioned it about Kenny Omega, and I mentioned it about Chris Jericho previously. The idea that Impact Wrestling couldn't afford Bray Wyatt isn't true. Impact Wrestling can absolutely afford Bray Wyatt. They are backed by a company and owned by a company in Anthem that's got a lot of money. They've got the bank balance to pull it off. It's just a case of when it comes to Wyatt, and I think this might be a sticking point when it comes to him, Impact Wrestling does have momentum right now in terms of they're putting on a good product, and they've got people, they had people like Kenny Omega in there, Christian Cage is the world champion, they've had Jay White show up in there. Of course, they've got the relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling, AAA, the NWA, all that kind of stuff. They've got that AEW, they've got that relationship with the company, and that does have momentum. But in reality, they would be coming into a company, or Wyatt would be coming into a company that is kind of, struggling in terms of the ratings right now. It's 120, 130,000 people watching on Access TV. I know you can count in social media metrics, YouTube, etc. But in reality, I think Wyatt would probably look at that and say, no, in reality, I probably want to go to Dynamite where I'm going to be viewed by 1.1 million people or a million people. And AEW is the company that has the buzz right now, and I think AEW will make a strong play for him. When it comes to the other names that we're going to talk about shortly, I don't know if AEW have made as strong of a play for those talents. So whilst Impact Wrestling is very interested, I think I would be very surprised if Bray Wyatt showed up in Impact. It would be a massive, massive signing for them, no doubt about it. It would be a huge deal if Impact Wrestling was truly able to pull off this signing, but I just don't know if I see it at this point. One name, though, that is reportedly set to debut in Impact Wrestling, it looks like, is Bray Wyatt's former Wyatt family protege, Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman's WWE release won't be the last that pro wrestling fans will see of the monster among men, because the former Universal Champion is in outstanding shape and training for bodybuilding competition. He has teased Chicago, meaning AEW, and other places, but it seems like he is going to land in another destination. According to a report from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Braun Strowman's likely landing spot will be Impact Wrestling. This is a bit of a surprise to some because, of course, he was a huge name in WWE, former Universal Champion, has been one of their biggest stars in recent years at times, and it'll be interesting to see where he lands in Impact Wrestling and how much he's pushing that company. Logic would suggest Braun Strowman in Impact Wrestling becomes Impact World Champion relatively quickly. This is what Dave Meltzer said in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, quote, "It appears that former Braun Strowman will be here. Strowman is interesting because he is a big name who was a headliner in WWE until recently, and we would probably be pushed to the top here. It's also worth noting, as I mentioned, that Impact Wrestling is reportedly making heavy plays towards Bray Wyatt. Strowman already said that he will see Wyatt again after Wyndham Rotunda's release. So, Impact Wrestling, this would be a huge, huge sign. Any of the names we're talking about today, when it comes to Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, Buddy Murphy, they would all be massive signings for Impact Wrestling. Arguably, this would be the biggest, not just, literally and physically, but in terms of someone that's just come off WWE television, a guy that was on a contract that was over $1 million per year. Is he going to get that in Impact Wrestling? Probably not. I don't think he's going to be earning $1 million a year on an Impact Wrestling contract or anything like that. But I think Braun Strowman is a guy, he'll come in, he'll be Impact World Champion almost immediately. Honestly, and I know that might upset some fans, but Braun Strowman's, he's a guy that WWE pushed to the moon for a long period of time. He was a guy that when he turned into a single star in 2016, he rapidly became one of the most over characters on the roster, was feuding with the likes of Roman Reigns. Again, whilst he wasn't the original choice to face Goldberg at WrestleMania 36, he did defeat Goldberg at WrestleMania 36, whilst his Universal Championship reign was incredibly underwhelming and the wrong time. There was a period of time, 2017, 2018, where Braun Strowman could have been pushed as the top babyface in WWE, or certainly one of the top stars, should have been Universal Champion, should have been WWE World Heavyweight Champion. The only reason that he wasn't is because WWE absolutely just butchered his creative and butchered his booking as a talent on Monday Night Raw at the time. And again, you go back and listen to those Braun Strowman reactions and those Braun Strowman ovations that he was getting in 2017, 2018. You'll struggle to find a guy that was more over on the roster. You'll struggle to find a guy that was, again, more popular or generated as big of a reaction. WWE, for better or for worse, knows how to book big men. And for a period of time, they had Braun Strowman at a huge height of popularity, and for whatever reason, they got it massively wrong. Massively wrong. And look, him being released earlier this year was a massive surprise, a huge surprise, and a surprise that a lot of people didn't see coming. And if Impact Wrestling is able to pull this one off, it would be a massive statement of intent. It would be probably, let's think about it here. This would probably be the biggest signing that Impact Wrestling has done, certainly in the Anthem era, I think. I think that's probably fair to say. But I think, in terms of the biggest signing, it's up there. It's going back to like the 2008, 2009 periods when they were signing, your Kurt Angles or your Bobby Lashley's or your Booker T's or whoever you were signing from WWE at the time. And I know arguably that's what caused Impact Wrestling or TNA Wrestling's downfall, was their over-reliance on past WWE stars. But let's be honest here. They were signing big names at the time, whether it's Jeff Hardy, again, Kurt Angle, whatever. I think there's a great argument to state it's probably the biggest signing since then, if they can pull it off. In reality, I suppose you have to look at it, and we spoke about this before, where would Braun Strowman go? Now, I know a lot of people, and probably rightfully so, now that he's going to show up in Impact Wrestling, a lot of people said that they couldn't see him signing for AEW, and I think that's probably fair, to be honest. I think that's probably fair. A lot of people have said that they didn't think that Braun Strowman fit in AEW. He didn't fit the All Elite Wrestling style, and just that audience would hate him. I kind of looked at it from the other point of view of, yeah, that audience would absolutely hate Braun Strowman. So that's the exact reason to sign Braun Strowman in AEW, because that audience won't be able to stand him. That audience will think, oh, that guy sucks. He's a WWE creation. He's a WWE Performance Center creation. He's a corporate person. He wasn't even a pro wrestler. He doesn't like pro wrestling. He's only in it for the money. That audience with AEW is a hardcore pro wrestling audience, and Braun Strowman doesn't really fit into that. But that's kind of the point, right? If Braun Strowman doesn't fit into that, that's the makings of a top heel, a really exciting heel. So that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. I think in reality, Strowman probably decided to sign with Impact Wrestling for the same reason that, say, a Jordan Grace has decided to re-sign with Impact Wrestling. She spoke previously about her decision to re-sign with Impact, and she said, look, the reason I decided to re-sign with Impact is because I don't want to commit to a full-time schedule anymore, or I don't want to commit to however many days a month. Impact Wrestling books me for like 3 days a month, which is just a big block of television tapings, and then I can do whatever I want to do. I think she said she does transcription work. Obviously, she's competing in powerlifting competitions, and I think maybe bodybuilding competitions in the future as well, and has outside interests too. And I think Braun Strowman's probably going to be the same. He's a bit like, look, I still want to wrestle, and I still want to make good money from pro wrestling. Of course, he's going to get a good contract from Impact Wrestling. Again, not to the money that he was getting before, but he'd be getting decent money from Impact Wrestling. He can do that again, 3-4 days a month. He can then do bodybuilding competitions like he's going to be doing. He can obviously transition into acting as well, which I think is what he wants to do too. He's got the look for it and the size for it, and he can do whatever else he wants. And why wouldn't he do that? Especially if AEW isn't interested, which it doesn't look like they are. And it still keeps his name out there in pro wrestling. And eventually, when it comes to Braun Strowman, this has been spoken about a lot as well. I think, and this is probably true, I think when it comes to Braun Strowman, the expectation is that at some point he will end back up in WWE. He's a WWE guy. And part of the feeling when he got released earlier this year, which I tend to believe, is that WWE looked at his contract and went, you know what? When he signed his contract, maybe he was worth $1 million a year. Now, he's not. And the problem is, we can't go to him and say, you're not worth this anymore, and want to renegotiate a contract. Braun Strowman would be like, no, I don't want to renegotiate a contract. Why would I want to renegotiate a contract? That's $1 million. So WWE instead decided to fire him, and they'll let it cool off 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Then in 18 months' time, they go back to Braun Strowman and say, want to come back? It's for less money. And Braun Strowman, because maybe stuff doesn't pay off for him or whatever, he wants to go back to WWE. He feels like he's got unfinished business, whatever it may be. He then decides, yeah, I do want to come back. And he signs a contract that isn't worth as much as $1 million a year. It's a bit of a crappy negotiating tactic by WWE. And it's a bit, it feels a bit dirty and a bit wrong. But WWE being dirty and wrong when it comes to their negotiating tactics is nothing new. Let's be honest here. It's nothing new at all. So I still wouldn't be surprised if he ended up going back to WWE. But for the near future and the current future, it looks like Braun Strowman is going to Impact Wrestling, which is, look, it's a massive deal for Impact, and it's a great get and a great sign. Now, Braun Strowman has continued to tease this. Strowman hinted that he's bound for Impact Wrestling and will be using the name Titan during the next chapter of his career. Strowman tweeted, quote, remember in life, if you're going to do something, make sure you make an impact. Carve your name in stone. #Titan. Now, earlier this week, Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore said on a Twitch clip that Impact is currently on the road to Braun for Glory, indicating that the former WWE superstar could make his debut at the Bound for Glory pay-per-view in October. Talking on the stream, D'Amore also teased that Buddy Murphy is bound for Impact as well. Strowman does have another date already booked. He's agreed to wrestle at Qatar Pro Wrestling's Super Slam 3 show, which takes place in February 26, 2022. Strowman will travel to Qatar next month to sign this agreement. He's currently, as I mentioned, serving his 90-day non-compete clause. He will become a free agent on Tuesday, August 31st. He was released by WWE earlier this year on June 2nd. So it looks like he's going to be going by the name of Titan in Impact Wrestling, not Adam Shear. I still think he could go by Adam Shear. He might be known as like Titan Adam Shear or something like that. I don't know. But Braun Strowman looks to be going to Impact Wrestling, maybe making his debut at Bound for Glory, which of course is October. So it would mean that we still have to wait a while. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull the trigger a bit earlier. But look, so let's face it. It's probably the biggest time to do it. Would probably be Bound for Glory in October. Whether or not he just debuts there or he's going to be wrestling there, that's another story. Considering that Bound for Glory would be live and will have the most attention, look, as I mentioned, the Impact Wrestling shows at the moment aren't generating a ton of attention when it comes to certainly the ratings on Access TV. I know they've just moved to this YouTube model. I don't know how that's playing out for them. Maybe they think, look, the next time we're going to have a ton of attention is Bound for Glory because we're going to have this main event that might be, say, Christian Cage versus Josh Alexander for the Impact World Championship. We can have Braun Strowman show up then as well and do that kind of thing there. So maybe that's the situation that they're going to go in. But Braun Strowman looks to be headed to Impact Wrestling. And look, it's a big signing for Impact. There's no doubt about it. Now, we spoke about Buddy Murphy previously, but Buddy Murphy also looks to be headed to Impact Wrestling as well. According to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Buddy Murphy has signed a contract with Impact Wrestling. It was also said that due to Murphy heavily pushing independent dates, it's unlikely he'll be going to AEW. This is what Meltzer had to say, quote, "It appears that Buddy Murphy will be here with Murphy as Buddy Matthews. Murphy seemed more suited to AEW in the sense that he's a great worker. People don't even realize how good in a place built around that. The fact that Murphy is heavily pushing looking for indie dates would indicate he's not going to AEW, but AEW is also loaded and Murphy could be pushed higher here as far as being one of their focal stars." I spoke about this before, that I think that in reality this is probably a right move. This is probably a right move for Buddy Murphy in the sense that all of these names are coming in to AEW right now, whether it's CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, Ric Flair, possibly Bray Wyatt as well. What's the best way of Buddy Murphy making an impact? Probably in Impact Wrestling. Not to say he would get lost in the shuffle, because I don't know if he would. But if he goes into Impact for, say, 12 months, 18 months, something like that, and then starts to sell out, then begins to then starts to build up his names, then starts to maybe win the Impact World Championship, have these great matches. In 18 months' time, when AEW is still looking for talent, and they're looking to bring names in, Buddy Murphy suddenly got this buzz about him once again. And he's got this buzz about him, and then AEW brings him in at a higher point than he would be now. And I think maybe that's what Murphy's thinking. He wants to go out there and earn it. He wants to go out there on the independent scene, and he wants to go out there and, again, make some buzz about himself. For ages, he just sat on the sidelines in WWE. Everyone knew the matches he could have. He had it against Aleister Black, against Roman Reigns, against Daniel Bryan. He had great matches. Mustafa Ali. He's had all of those great matches. People know his quality. And I think he wants to remind people of that before he does go to AEW. I think at some point he will end up there. But I think he's keen on, again, working the independent circuit, building up a bit of a reputation and a name at this point. And then eventually I think he'll go to AEW. So talk about names added to the roster. Braun Strowman and Buddy Murphy, big names. Bray Wyatt, that's one that I think is still a little bit there right now. There's been lots of talk, as I mentioned, about Impact Wrestling's ratings recently and their YouTube stuff, etc. But Anthem CEO Leonard Asper took to Twitter this week and teased a big distribution deal for Impact Wrestling. Asper responded to an older tweet announcing Steve Macklin versus P.T. Williams for last Friday's Emergent special, which Macklin won, and thanked fans for watching the Impact product. He also touted insanely increasing numbers and said a, quote, big new distribution deal will be announced soon. This is what he said, quote, "Hey y'all, I'm here. Was busy trying to keep up with Impact Wrestling launching so many channel streams and products, getting pumped things. Thank you for watching in insanely increasing numbers. Big new distribution deal coming soon." Now, what that distribution deal means, I have no idea. I highly doubt it's for the United States. Probably something to do with overseas. Time will tell when it comes to that, but I think it's probably due to something overseas. Look, if Impact Wrestling can increase their distribution in the United States, that's what they need to do. That's the next level for them. We spoke about, how did they level up? And I think it's been proved at this point, like the talent's kind of, not that it's not important, but the talent's only going to get you so high. Look at the names they've had on the show recently. Jay White, Kenny Omega, Christian Cage soon, Braun Strowman, Buddy Murphy. They can only move the needle so much in the sense that the needle's only going to go so far because there's an end to it. They need to level up in terms of the distribution in the United States. Now, is he referring to that? I tend to say no, but time will tell. I would assume it's probably something for overseas. Finally, we have an update on when the Christian Cage vs. Ace Austin Impact World Championship match for Victory Road will be announced, or will be taped rather. It hasn't been taped as of yet. Victory Road was taped earlier this month at Skyway Studios in Nashville. But the Austin and Cage match wasn't taped as of right now. But the Austin Cage match was not taped at the recent Nashville tapings. It looks like that match will take place at the Impact tapings that have been announced on September 17, 18, and 19. So I don't know if that's a case of maybe something will happen between now and then for the Impact World Championship. Maybe it All Out. Next week will tell us that. But it's going to be certainly very interesting. But look, guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.